Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and we are here for what is going to be a yearly tradition for us where we make our case for the player that, well, I should say honestly, that I want the Jaguars to pick up in the 2025 NFL Draft. So, going back to last year, the player that we talked about then was Malik Nabers, and there was a lot of conversations before the draft of maybe the Jaguars trade up. Is Malik going to be there at, say, pick number 8 or pick number 9? And ultimately, obviously, it did not happen. And the Jaguars got a hell of a pick in Brian Thomas Jr. So this year, we have a very different player we're going to talk about, and it's a very different draft. And for me, at the end of the day, I think, well, things have constantly bounced around this offseason. There's surely been things that I've changed my opinions on. The player that I believe that the Jaguars should select in the 2025 NFL Draft is running back from Boise State, Ashton Jeanty. Now, before I get into the whole debate here and the argument for it and maybe what people will say against, because there are plenty of people who would oppose this. It's a very heated topic, I would say, in the Jaguars community. I'm going to preface it by saying that if it were possible, or on the table for an offer to be good enough without involving a first round pick to move up with Cleveland in the draft Travis Hunter, I would do it. It's just my personal opinion. I am assuming in this scenario, in just real life, that that is not going to be possible without giving up, say, a first round pick in 2026. And I think that just at that point gets to be a little too steep. You don't know where this team's going to finish that year. You don't want to get too aggressive in doing it. And so it's kind of like what we talked about last year, way back with Malik Nabers, because it was also a conversation of, do you have to give up a first if you're going to move up as far as you need to? And if you had done that, that's the 5th overall pick this year. So that's why I'm not that aggressive with it. But if it were possible, say you gave up a 2nd and a 3rd or something like that, I think Travis Hunter would be the guy we're talking about instead. But I'm assuming Cleveland is very much set on taking him or Abdul Carter and would not want to move down that far without getting a first-round pick in return in the future. Now, talking about this debate between Ashton Jeanty and some of the other players you hear, but predominantly Mason Graham. For me, this is a conversation of understanding what this draft class is, the type of players that are there, Jacksonville's situation, and how do you come out of this with a player that you can ultimately say was worth the 5th overall pick. And I have a very hard time justifying it for really anyone at that selection. And I could almost say that for Ashton Jeanty, just because of positional value. But this is a draft class where, I mean, you take a look at my grades, for example. You have, obviously, Cam Ward is top player in this class when you consider positional value. He's going to go at number 1. He's not on our chart because, well, he's going to Tennessee and we don't need a quarterback. But the only players that I would say are like elite prospects that are at valuable positions are Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. Those are the only two. And we're imagining that they are gone at pick 2 and pick 3 in this class. So it leaves Jacksonville in a very, very difficult situation where your options are players that may not be at a super important position, or a highly valued position would be a better way of putting it, because I do value running back maybe more than most people. You could take a great player at that type of position, or you could take someone who maybe plays, for example, cornerback, like Will Johnson, or for me, could be a left tackle in Josh Simmons, where it is a position that maybe matters more, but you have major questions about these prospects, right? Will Johnson, I think I can get over them maybe a little bit easier, but he did not run the 40-yard dash. There are questions about his long speed. He did not play as well this year. Josh Simmons, obviously coming off an injury. That's a big deal, and he did not get to fully prove himself this season. You also talk about Mason Graham, of course, where this is a player that I think a lot of people look at as a blue chip prospect, but there is a question about the overall ceiling for Mason Graham because of what you see from him as a pass rusher, the tools that he has, and is he going to be able to go to the NFL level and get better as a pass rusher? Is he going to have everything he needs to dominate there? And to me, I think Mason Graham is a good prospect. I think he is a good, relatively safe first round guy. I do not see him as someone worth the 5th overall pick. And that is where it really stops me. Where, look, if Jacksonville makes that selection, I think you're getting a good player. I have to make that very clear. I do not think, though, that when we look back on this draft class in a couple years, that you're going to say, wow, Mason Graham was a top 5 player in this class. The Jaguars made the right decision. Good on them. So that's a big part of the conversation. Now, Jacksonville's situation, as far as their roster and needs, I think it's a very unique one. And what I mean by that is that this is a team that ultimately we have a lot of positions that have been answered with mostly average players. There are not a lot of areas on this team where you would say that this player is a superstar, for example. So if we go through the offense, quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, you hope that Trevor Lawrence can take the next step, right? You want him to be a great player. The reality right now is that Trevor Lawrence has a lot to prove, right? And we may believe in him, but you cannot call him a superstar at this point in his career. You look at the backfield. A lot of players with a lot of questions, right? And Tank Bigsby, I think, obviously did better last year, but this is not someone that I'm looking at as like the long-term future of the Jacksonville Jaguars rushing attack. You look at the wide receiver position. Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is the one player that you can definitively say on this team is a superstar. Shout out to the guy who drafted him for finally getting it right at the wide receiver position before he got fired, which he should have been fired. Not even going to pretend that he deserved to stick around. I'm glad the decisions were made that were made, right? But Brian Thomas Jr. is a superstar player for the Jaguars. But otherwise, you don't have anyone else at wide receiver like that. It's a lot of average, right? You don't have a clear need, but you have areas you can upgrade. You look at the tight end position. Brennan Strange, really good blocker, decent receiver, but this is not a superstar player. This is not a star player. I would not call him any of those things, although I think he can develop into being a good tight end. The offensive line. Same thing here, right? A lot of players who have been sort of middle of the pack in the NFL. And I think right now, you would probably say Walker Little is the best of this group. But he's still had a lot of injury issues. And he is not someone who has been dominant in his time. So you have a whole offense, right, that this really applies for. You look at the defense. I would say on the interior, Eric Armstead is an above average player. But we don't know for sure that he is what he was with, say, San Francisco. He's also had injury issues with them. Those might flare up again. The pass rushers, Josh Hines-Allen, he is close to being a superstar. He is more of the top of the second tier of players. Trayvon Walker is a good young player. The question is, how good is he going to get? And there's a really high ceiling there, and he might reach that. We'll have to see. But that's still not the case right now. Look at the linebacker corps. A lot of really good players, not really superstars there. You look at cornerback. A lot of average, right? Tyson Campbell's usually above average. He's usually been a good corner, but ultimately, he gets hurt a lot. And in the safety position, at most, I think you have average players. So what's the theme, right? It's average. You hear average about almost everything on this team. But I also look at it, and I don't sit here and say, if we cannot replace this player, then this season is in the tank, right? We're going to, suck as a football team. There's not really a player I look at and say, we're screwed if we don't replace him. So what that really means for the Jaguars is that we can go any direction in this draft. And ultimately, that allows for a lot of options. And we need to look at this roster and ask ourselves, what do we want it to look like? And if this is truly a rebuild, we have to understand that it is probably best to get the best solutions to those areas we want to upgrade in the order that they arrive, right? If we are going to sit here and say maybe defensive line is the top thing we want to address, and then force a player at number 5 that maybe isn't the ideal, perfect defensive lineman that you're shooting for, now you're lowering the ceiling. If you keep approaching things in a biggest need first manner, you might eventually solve a lot of your problems, but you're not really going to have massive advantages or massive strengths because you're not always getting the best player available. So when I look at this team, if I was going to tell you what I want to see improve and what I think would ideally change, and this is not stuff that can all be done in one offseason, but what I would want to ideally change for this to be a Super Bowl roster, I would look at the run game. I would say I want a legit running back, right? Doesn't have to be elite, but I want a top tier running back. I do not believe we have that on the team right now. I look at receiver. I would like to draft a rookie that is going to be a top-end wide receiver, either a high-end wide receiver 2 or a legit wide receiver 1. I look at tight end. I would like to add another name there. I think it would be great to get a legitimate starter and still have Strange be more of a tight end too. I look at the offensive line. There could be a scenario where I would want to upgrade over all 5 players in the future. Now, I'm going to say this, Anton Harrison should not have the verdict out on him yet, but so far, I'm disappointed in what he's done as a run blocker. I do not want to settle for players that only do well in pass protection, don't make an impact in the run game. I want guys who are all around. So, we'll see what happens there. On the defensive line, I want a game record on the interior. I think that would be great to add. I want another pass rusher on the outside. Okay, linebacker, I think that's good. And I think at cornerback, you want a number 1 guy opposite of Tyson Campbell. And I think the safety room, I would gut it. I would completely redo everything there. So it's a lot of things I listed, right? And once again, this isn't stuff that we're going to be able to fix everything this offseason. But I take note of that list. And I say, even though we can't fix this all this offseason, I want to start working on these things, and I want to get the best solutions possible to these problems. And so would it be better for me to start maybe with the defensive line and get a good player that maybe could be very good down the road if he continues to develop? Or would I be better off taking the elite running back that is going to be a phenomenal answer to one of the areas I want to improve? Because if I take players as they come and what's best available and fits what I want to do, but maybe isn't always the top need, eventually you're going to have the best solutions to your problems on your team. Whereas if I'm going to force what is my biggest need, I'm just going to go in that order, maybe I have a little more short-term success that's possible. Could also go the opposite way. But long-term, I'm going to have a weaker roster. And so what is available in this draft class? What is the best thing for Jacksonville that they're going to need on their team? It's running back. It's Ashton Jeanty. That is where I sit with this. This is a player that is basically built in a lab to play the position. And any of the questions you have with him, the fumbles, I don't think are a huge deal. I think it's possible they could flare up at some point, but I think he's generally a fine prospect in that regard. And where it's only really being noted because what the heck else do you talk about? Still a good pass protector. And as a receiver, he just didn't get used a lot this year while he was in 2023 because he was getting how many yards on the ground per rush? 6.9. This guy just dominated all season long. He nearly broke Barry Sanders' college rushing record for a season. That's the type of player we're talking about. So I look at Ashton Jeanty, I see an incredible running back prospect. I see a guy that I can bring onto my team that is average right now, that has a lot of middle of the pack players. Some might disappoint, some might overperform, but this is a team that lacks a lot of superstar talent. And even if this offensive line is not built perfectly for what I want for Ashton Jeanty, I still understand that if it were me, that I'm going to make that commitment to say, if I'm going to bring in this player, we're going to go make moves to upgrade this offensive line. That's something we're going to continue to work on. And we're going to have a plan for how Jeanty is going to be in the best situation we can give him to succeed in Jacksonville. And if I bring in that type of player, I think it transforms this offense. I think that forces teams to try to stop the run. It's going to force more people into the box. It's going to help Brian Thomas Jr. burn defenses, along with Diami Brown, who's going to be a deep threat as well. It makes your offense that was completely one-dimensional last year dynamic, and it allows you to also improve this team along with the coaching that is going to be better this year. They're going to be put in better situations, and you put all these things together, you're going to have a far better team than what you had in 2024. It will be night and day comparing it to that year. So I look at it from that lens, and I say, yeah, Ashton Jeanty might not be the most important position. He may not be the number one need for this team. But if I want to get a player that A, is going to be worth the 5th overall pick and a top 5 prospect from this class, and B, does fit into an area that I want to improve on this team, and helps as well to change the mentality and the physical element of the Jaguars that has been so pathetic in recent years, I think it's a slam dunk pick to bring in that type of player. I think that's why you're starting to hear more talk about it. That's why you see the betting odds shift. That's why you might see the Jaguars actually do this next Thursday. Now, I don't know for sure. Maybe they take Mason Graham. They could take Jalen Walker. They could trade out of the pick with another team who wants Jeanty. There's a lot of things that could happen. But I would love it for the Jaguars if they went after the top tier player that's available, that is going to transform this offense and is going to be a phenomenal answer to one of your needs. If you keep approaching things that way, you keep taking the best players on the board that still fit into what you need to improve, or they have a path to helping this team. May not be the best result in 2025, but 2025 is in the Super Bowl window for this team. We are building for the long term, and you're going to be a lot happier if you have the best roster over those years, rather than just, we're going to go all in and only focus on what we need in 2025 and call it good. Just don't think that's a good way to approach this. So that's your argument for Ashton Jeanty. I would love to hear what other people have to say about who they want. I know some people agree. I know some people disagree. It's a very difficult season, I think, for the draft, because I can't sit here and say that there is just one blatantly obvious option that is a complete home run with no questions attached. Right? As much as I like Jeanty, as much as I think he is the closest to that, there's still questions there. So I'd love to hear what you guys think, what you would do in the NFL draft. Definitely let me know. We will probably on our next video be talking about some hot takes. So if you go on my Twitter, find that post, you can let me know something you think is sort of a hot take for the 2025 NFL draft. I'll give my reaction to those, and we'll talk about that on the next video. I appreciate y'all watching. Shout out to our channel members: Premier Seer 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Ichi Wiener, Mr. Dolphin, Scrubber Ducky 500, Brian Foster, and Frangies. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And finally, go Jags.